Hi, readers. Today I wanted to talk about a new type of text and kind of explain to you how important it is when you approach a text, when you select it, and before you read it, making sure that you are revving up your mind in the right way. Now, when we learned how to do this at the beginning of this nonfiction unit, we learned that we needed to preview the text. We needed to look for the subheadings, and we needed to maybe also look for pop-out sentences and identify the main idea in detail and make sure we understood what the keywords meant and to take a look at the photographs, right? And we also learned that we had to kind of think of our prior knowledge about this subject. What is my schema? What is my background knowledge? What do I already know about this topic? Now, I want to talk to you today about a new type of nonfiction. So, we've gotten really good at learning facts from different expository nonfiction texts. Gorillas was an example of that. It gave me lots of information. It had organization like boxes and bullets. It had main idea and details. It had subheadings and maps and diagrams and photographs with captions. This is considered a nonfiction text called expository. But there are other texts that give us information, but they do it in a different way. They're organized in a different way, which means we need to rev our minds up in a different way. Here are some examples of nonfiction text, but they're not expository. When I open it up, I'm not going to see a lot of subheadings. I'm not going to see photographs with captions and diagrams and maps. What I'm going to see is going to look really similar to the narratives that we started our third grade year reading. So it makes sense that these types of texts are called narrative nonfiction. And you might be thinking, whoa, 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 whoa. The last time we picked up a narrative book, it was fiction. It was telling a story and it could have been totally make-believe. Well, there can be narrative fiction, but there can also be narrative nonfiction, where an author tells a story and also has facts within that story as you read. So the way we rev up our mind is not like, okay, I better go to the glossary, better check that table of contents, better look for those subheadings. No, instead we say, okay, I am going to rev up my mind by thinking about this as I would about a regular narrative. I'm going to be thinking about the characters and the problem and the solution and the settings and what is their end goal and how do they overcome the obstacles that are in their way. And I'm going to think about that text as a story, knowing that as I'm reading this story, I'm also learning facts. Let's hear from our other reading teacher about how she practices this skill and learn some tips that she can give us.
And I'm going to add a new bullet to our chart so that before we think about its text features, we do some really big work. We are going to add this idea right here, that when we take a new piece of nonfiction, we're going to think to ourselves, what sort of text is it?
So that's like picking up these two pieces of nonfiction. Before I get ready to read, I need to ask myself, what sort of text is it? Is it an expository nonfiction text where I need to look for all of those things we've already learned about? Or is it a narrative nonfiction and I need to approach it as a story that has facts embedded in it?
Is it an expository text like the Gorillas book? Is it a book that sounds like a story, but it's about a real person, like a biography? Once we know what kind of text it is, then we can move on to think, what will the book mostly be about, and what prior knowledge do I have that will help me get warmed up for reading? The text that I'm going to start reading to you is not organized into categories or boxes of ideas. It's a story about a real person.
Certainly doesn't sound like an expository nonfiction. Sounds like we're going to be listening to a narrative nonfiction.
Biography. That means there's going to be a storyline about a person that's running alongside all the facts about real events and real places. And I know that when I finish a book like a biography, I can retell it in a way that shows all I know about my story elements. I can tell you about the character and what the character really wants. I can tell you about the character's problem. I can tell you about how the character tried to solve it and if there was a resolution to the problem. So remember, when reading a biography, read it like a story, remembering that it's also going to be nonfiction with facts along with those events. So it helps to think, what does this character really want? What gets in this character's way? What am I learning about the setting, the problem, the solution? Are you ready? We're going to give it a try now together. Benjamin Katz and Augustus Poggenay were born in Warsaw, Poland. However, they did not meet until they both emigrated to the United States. Continuing the Polish custom, their wedding was arranged by a matchmaker. After the marriage, the two settled in the Jewish quarter of Brooklyn, New York. In a two-family house at number 438 Vermont Street, their third child, Jacob Ezra Katz, was born on March 11, 1916.
Now, as you're reading narrative nonfiction, we need to pause and make sure we understand what we're reading, just like we did with expository nonfiction. So right now, I know what it sounds like is I have a mom and a dad character that came to the United States from a different country. Someone kind of played matchmaker in their lives and introduced them to each other, and they got married and they settled into a house, and then it says their third son, and then it tells me the name of their third son. Well, they have yet to tell me about the first and second siblings, so my prediction is that this third son is going to be a pretty important character in my narrative nonfiction.
Keats became interested in art at an early age. His mother encouraged his talent, but his father seemed only to criticize his ability. Working at Pete's coffee shop in Greenwich Village, Benjamin Katz knew how hard earning a living could be. He felt that his son could never be successful as an artist. However, his father did purchase tubes of paint for Keats under the pretense of having traded bowls of soup to starving artists. If you don't think artists starve, well, let me tell you, one man came in the other day and swapped me a tube of paint for a bowl of soup.
Let me pause again. We've had some developments in our story. So I have our dad character and our son character. What does the character want? That's something that I need to keep in mind when I'm reading narrative nonfiction. This character wants to be an artist. What are some hurdles that this character has to overcome? Well, his father does not seem to fully support him because he's afraid he won't make money. However, interesting little side fact is that his father does buy him some paints.
Are you thinking about what our main character, young Ezra, no, it's Jacob back then, really wants? Yeah, he wants to be an artist, and what's in his way? His dad being really worried about him, that he's going to have a hard time making a living as an artist. But at the same time, his dad's supporting him by buying paints. So even though we're not very far in our text, we're already thinking, who is our character? What does our character really want? And what gets in our character's way? Now, use what you know about stories. What have you heard that makes you predict what's probably going to happen when I read this next little snippet of text? Listen very carefully. Let's keep growing our knowledge about our character and the setting and the problem and what our character really wants. When Benjamin Katz died on January 1935, Keats, on the day before his high school graduation, had to identify his father's body. For the first time, he learned that his father had been proud of his work. In his Caldecott Medal speech in 1963, Keats shared the experience, saying, "I found myself staring deep into his secret feelings. There, in his wallet, were worn and tattered newspaper clippings of the notices of the awards that I had won. My silent admirer and supplier, he had been torn between his dread of my leading a life of hardship and his real pride in my work." Keats authored and or illustrated more than 85 books for children. In 1980, he was awarded the University of Southern Mississippi Medallion for outstanding contributions in the field of children's literature. Readers, are you noticing whether it's an expository type of nonfiction like Gorillas, or whether it's this more narrative nonfiction that feels story-like? You have to put all the pieces together. And one of those big pieces you put together when you read narrative nonfiction are some of the story elements, as well as real facts.
That's the beauty of a narrative nonfiction. You get a story and facts all in the same text. So let's practice finding some of those story elements in a fact-based book.